Welcome back, deep divers. Ever find yourselves wondering, what's the limit to what we can actually know?
It's a question that's haunted thinkers for centuries, right? And honestly, it's a rabbit hole worth diving into.
Yeah, and today, we're strapping on our philosophical scuba gear and taking the plunge with a real heavyweight. Kant's critique of pure reason.
We're talking about the nature of knowledge itself. What can we know for sure? And how do we even know that we know it?
Okay, so full disclosure, you gave me a mountain of reading for this
A
one.
little light reading, right?
But one thing that really jumped out was this idea of a priori knowledge. Stuff we just seem to get, no experience needed.
Exactly. Think of it like this. All bachelors are unmarried. You don't need to go on a bachelor safari to verify that, right?
True, true.
It's true by definition. It's built-in knowledge. That's a priori.
Okay, so that's different from it's raining outside, which requires a quick glance out the window.
That's a posteriori knowledge learned through experience. And Kant argues that while both are important, it's the a priori stuff, that innate understanding that forms the base for things like math, logic, even science.
Interesting. So if we have this built-in knowledge, this a priori understanding, where does it come from?
Well, that's where things get really trippy. Kant introduces this concept called transcendental idealism.
Ooh, now we're talking big words.
Essentially, it suggests that we can only ever really know how things appear to us, not how they actually are in some objective reality.
Hold on, so are you saying we're all living in the Matrix?
Not quite. It's more like,
Yeah.
imagine we're all wearing these special glasses, right?
Yeah, okay, I'm with you.
And these glasses, they represent the way our minds are structured. They shape how we experience the world through things like space and time. But the catch is, we can never take these glasses off. We're always seeing reality through them.
Okay, I'm picturing these philosophical shades I can't remove. But if everyone's perception is filtered this way, how can we ever agree on anything? How do we know we're not all just running around with totally different realities?
That's the fascinating part. Kant argues that these glasses, these structures of our minds, they're not random. They're universal to all thinking beings. It's why, despite our individual experiences, we can still agree on basic truths.
So there's some comfort in knowing we're all basically working with the same operating system, even if our desktops look a bit different.
Exactly. And this leads us to one of the most mind-bending parts of Kant's work, the antinomies of pure reason.
Antinomies. I knew a big word was coming. Hit me with it. What are we talking about here?
So think of antinomies as these ultimate contradictions that pop up when we try to apply our reason, our logic, to concepts that go beyond our possible experience.
Okay, getting a little head spin here, but keep going.
For example, think about the universe as a whole.
Okay, thinking about it. Big. Mysterious. A little intimidating, if I'm honest.
Right. Now ask yourself, is the universe infinite? Or does it have a boundary? Does it have a beginning and end?
Questions for the ages right there.
Exactly. Our minds crave a concrete answer. We want to know. But what Kant shows is that you can build equally logical, equally valid arguments for both sides.
Wait, really? How could that even be possible?
Because we're bumping up against the limits of our understanding. For example, we can say the universe must have a beginning, right? Because how could an infinite amount of time have already passed?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. But we can also argue that the universe cannot have a beginning. Because if it did, what was there before the universe? What was there before time itself?
Whoa, okay. Yeah, you definitely went full mind-bending with that one. So are we just stuck then? Is this a philosophical dead end?
Not necessarily. It just means we might be asking the wrong questions or using the wrong tools to answer them. This is a key limit of what Kant calls theoretical reason, the kind we use for logic, for science.
So, if theoretical reason hits a wall with these massive existential questions, where do we even go from there? Do we just throw our hands up in the air and say, guess we'll never know?
That's where things get really interesting. Because Kant says, no, not so fast. There's another kind of reason, another way of approaching these questions. And that, my friend, is where practical reason comes in.
Okay, practical reason. It sounds like we're shifting gears a bit here, moving away from trying to pin down the ultimate truth of the universe and more towards, I don't know, how we're supposed to act in the world, even with all these limits on what we can know for sure.
You're right on the money. It's less about unraveling the secrets of the cosmos and more about navigating the world we experience, especially when it comes to morality.
Morality, huh? So even if we can't definitively say, yep, the universe began with a Big Bang or whatever, we can still figure out how to, be good people. make ethical choices.
Exactly. And this is where, believe it or not, Kant's transcendental idealism circles back around. Remember those glasses we talked about? The ones that shape our perception of reality.
Yeah, those philosophical shades we can't seem to take off.
Right. Well, those glasses, those structures of our minds, they're not just about processing raw information. They also influence how we understand fundamental concepts. Things like cause and effect, substance and accident, even the idea of a self.
So it's like we're hardwired to see the world in a certain way, to organize information according to these built-in categories, even if we can't prove those categories exist outside our own minds.
You got it. And this framework, these categories of understanding, as Kant calls them, they're essential for any kind of objective knowledge about the world as we experience it.
Hold on, objective knowledge. But I thought we established that we couldn't get past those glasses, those mental structures, to see the thing in itself, the ultimate reality.
We can't. Not in a pure, unfiltered way. But here's the thing. Because these mental structures, these lenses, are universal to all rational beings, it means we have a shared framework for understanding what Kant calls the phenomenal world, the world as it appears to us.
Okay, I think I'm following. It's like, yeah, we each have our own individual experience, but there's a deeper shared structure to how we all process and understand the world.
Precisely. That's why we can have shared objective knowledge about things like math, for instance. 2 plus 2 equals 4, no matter who's doing the adding. It's based on these fundamental structures of space, time, and causality that we all share as thinking beings.
Okay, that makes sense. So where do those big abstract ideas like God, freedom, and immortality fit into all of this? Can we ever really wrap our heads around them if they exist outside our experience, beyond those mental lenses?
Ah, excellent question. Kant calls these transcendental ideas concepts that burst out of the box of our possible experience. And he's very clear that theoretical reason, the kind we use for scientific inquiry, for measuring and observing, just isn't equipped to handle them.
So are we just supposed to throw our hands up in the air then? Give up on ever understanding those big existential mysteries?
Not necessarily. This is where practical reason steps in. It's a different way of approaching these questions, not through observation and measurement, but through morality. While we can't know these things with the same certainty that we know 2 plus 2 equals 4, we can hold justified beliefs about them based on ethics, on what it means to be a moral agent.
Interesting. So, for example, the idea of God, while not something we can prove scientifically, could still be a valid foundation for making moral choices.
Precisely. For Kant, the very concept of a moral law, the idea that there's a right and wrong way to act, implies a moral lawgiver. And that leads us to the idea of God.
It's a different kind of reasoning, not about concrete proof, but about what makes sense in the context of ethics, of living a moral life.
Exactly. And this is where Kant's work on ethics really takes center stage. He proposes that reason itself, this practical reason we're talking about, gives us the moral law, what he calls the categorical imperative.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Lay it on me. What is this categorical imperative? What does it tell us about how we should live?
In a nutshell, it says that we should act only according to rules that we could want everyone to follow universally without exception.
So, like, no cutting in line because you're in a hurry.
Exactly. Because if everyone lived by the rule, cut in line whenever it's convenient, well, it wouldn't be a line anymore, would it? Chaos.
Right, total chaos. It only works if everyone plays by the same rules.
Precisely. For Kant, this moral law, this categorical imperative, is just as real, just as objective as the laws of physics, even if it's rooted in practical reason, not theoretical reason.
So it's like this universal ethical code hardwired into our very being.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And it's this emphasis on morality, on the idea that we have a duty to act in accordance with this universal law that makes Kant's work so powerful and relevant even today.
We've covered a lot of ground again. From the limits of perception to the foundations of morality, it's clear that Kant's ideas have had a massive impact.
Absolutely. And there's still so much to unpack.
Right. We've just scratched the surface of Kant's thought and how it continues to shape philosophy, ethics, and even how we understand what it means to be human. So, let's see. We've journeyed through the limits of our perception, explored how our minds make sense of the world, and we even touched on morality. All thanks to Kant. Where do we even go from here?
That's the best part, right? Kant's critique of pure reason, it's not just some, ancient philosophical artifact. It's more like a launch pad for exploring those big, enduring questions, the ones that continue to shape how we understand ourselves, the world, everything, really.
I gotta say, one of the things that's really stuck with me through all this is the importance of, like, really thinking critically. It's like Kant is giving us this toolkit for navigating a world that's just overflowing with information.
Some of it.
Well, some of it's pretty
Ugh.
shaky.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's constantly pushing us to examine those assumptions we make, to dig down to the roots of what we believe. And maybe even more importantly, to accept that some things, they might just be beyond what we can grasp with our current understanding.
Which is kind of humbling when you really think about it.
It is, but it's also incredibly liberating. It means we're not stuck with the first explanation that comes along. We have the power and the responsibility, really, to engage with ideas critically, weigh the evidence, form our own conclusions, that kind of thing.
And that feels more important than ever these days, right? I mean, we are just bombarded with claims and counterclaims, opinions dressed up as facts. It's easy to get lost in all the noise.
Absolutely. But Kant, he gives us this framework for thinking about knowledge itself. He's reminding us that even when we're dealing with those limits of theoretical reason, the kind we use for those massive cosmological questions, even then, there's still room for meaning, for purpose.
Right. We can't forget about practical reason
Yeah.
and morality. It's like Kant saying, okay, even if we can't definitively know everything about the universe,
Yeah.
we can still strive to act in a way that aligns with what's right, with what's ethical.
Exactly. And that's where the categorical imperative really comes into play. It's not about personal preference or what's easy or convenient in the moment. It's about those universal ethical principles that apply to everyone, everywhere.
So it's a call to action just as much as it is a philosophical theory then.
Absolutely. Kant really believed that reason isn't just about, hoarding knowledge for the sake of it. It's about guiding our actions, making choices that align with this moral law, this imperative that we find within ourselves.
That's a powerful idea. It means that even with all these limits on our knowledge, even with those inevitable blind spots, we still have this incredible capacity to create a more just, a more ethical world.
Exactly. And that's a legacy that continues to inspire, to challenge us to this day.
Well, I've got to say, this deep dive into Kant has been quite a journey. We've definitely confronted some challenging concepts, explored the frontiers of what we can even know, and maybe even glimpsed a path toward living more ethically in the world.
And we've just scratched the surface. But hopefully, this deep dive has sparked some new ideas for you all, maybe inspired you to keep exploring this amazing world of philosophy.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe next time you're debating the meaning of life over coffee, you'll channel your inner Kant and drop some transcendental idealism on your friends.
Yeah, that I would love to see.
Until then, deep divers, happy exploring.